793 AD, you can probably see where this is heading. Thinking back through your history studies, 793 AD is the Viking raid on the holy island of Lindisfarne, Northumbria. A Viking party came onto the island, attacked the monastery, killed monks and others, wounded monks and others, and got away with the treasures of the monastery. Treasures in a monastery? Well, that's true. Many people had given the monastery silver and gold, some of them believing their souls could find peace through such gifts and the prayers offered because of those gifts. On the island were golden crucifixes. There were silver plates for the bread and wine of the Mass, and ivory chests in which reposed the relics of saints, some of which they took. The chapel walls were hung with shimmering tapestries, and in the writing room one could find some of the most beautiful illuminated manuscripts ever made. Historians like to have a significant event to begin the history of something, and this was what marked the beginning of the Viking Age, which lasted almost 300 years. The Vikings spread out through the British Isles, a heavy concentration in York and the Cooper's Gate area, where they are still finding in the excavations many wonderful icons of that age, the Vikings in the York area. Spread throughout the British Isles, they were in Ireland, of course, founded Dublin on the Liffey. My name is Murphy, Irish name. They went through the riverways of Russia. They came down the west coast of the European continent. They continued south, as far south as Baghdad. They went west to Iceland, and then to Greenland, and then to North America, Newfoundland. How far south did they go from there? We're not really sure. Did they get into what is now the United States? They have found some Viking coins in the state of Maine. Where they came from, not quite sure. It also appears that the Vikings established no permanent settlements in North America. It seems they just came in, took timber and pelts, and went back. Perhaps the indigenous people in North America were not so kind to them, hassled them. That might be the case. We're not really sure. But it appears they came in, took what they wanted, and returned east back to Greenland, Iceland, and so on. Our Baltic cruise is headed to Denmark, Sweden, Norway, the land the Vikings came from, and many of us have come from the lands the Vikings went to. You may have seen the movie 1958, comes up on TV once in a while, The Vikings. Characterized by two things. Number one, a really goofy plot. And number two, beautiful cinematography. The cinematographer was Jack Cardiff, a British cinematographer. He passed away in 2009 at the age of 94. He won an Academy Award, honorary Academy Award for his body of work in cinematography. But he did the Vikings. And the filmmakers went into the Viking Museum in Oslo, where there are some famous Viking ships, burial ships. And they got the exact dimensions from blueprints and created three replicas of Viking ships of that time. And Jack Cardiff shot these Viking ships coming down a fjord with snow-capped mountains in the background and waterfalls coming down the side. And it was glorious. People in theaters were applauding these gorgeous shots that he had framed. The movie starred Kirk Douglas, Tony Curtis, and Janet Leigh. Do you like famous lines from the movies? Like, Frankly, My Dear, I Don't Give a Damn from Gone with the Wind, or Round Up the Usual Suspects from Casablanca. There's a famous line in the Vikings. An English map maker came over onto the Viking side. And the Vikings wanted to return to England to capture a young woman who was engaged to English royalty. And the map maker says, I know the way, I know the seas. I should go kidnap the girl. And Kirk Douglas, Einar was his name in the movie, Kirk Douglas turns to him and says, you draw the maps, I'll go kidnap the girl. The Viking gods were Odin, he was the chief god, the king of gods, had many children, including Thor, who was the god of thunder and war, and then Freya, who was the goddess of love, the goddess of sex. She's my favorite, goddess of sex. Valhalla was the paradise of the Vikings. A warrior got there by dying with a sword in his hand. Valhalla was a mansion with many rooms, and you were in the company of Odin for banquets, feasts, this sort of thing. And they are still around because they are contained in the English words Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Another great image of the Vikings, and this is in the Viking Museum in Oslo, another great image is the burial ship. And the Gokstad burial ship from about 900 AD is in the Viking Museum in Oslo, and it's also in that movie, The Vikings, where Kirk Douglas dies at the very end. He's killed by Tony Curtis, who wins the girl. The body is prepared on the Viking ship and cast into the fjord. Flaming arrows are shot to set the Viking ship on fire. And there's this gorgeous image of the Viking ship floating away on fire. That is the burial site then of a very important Viking. So there's an example of that, an actual Viking burial ship in the Viking Museum in Oslo. So whatever you do, don't miss that. Get to the museum in Oslo.